My name is Peter Makumbe. I'm a research manager at Oppenheimer Generations Research and Conservation, and we oversee the Jennifer Ward Oppenheimer selection process and grant management. I am your facilitator today, where we will be sharing information about the grant, the application process, and answering any questions you may have. The JWO Research Grant was created in 2019 to honor the late Mrs. Jennifer Ward Oppenheimer and continue her passion for science and the African continent. The 150,000 US dollar grant is awarded annually to one recipient and covers a project for up to 3 years. Since its establishment, the JWO Research Grant has been awarded to 6 outstanding early career scientists who have gone on to create Africa-wide biodiversity indices, examine the impact of artificial light on vector-borne diseases, assess the impact of microplastics on our rivers and oceans, understand how the integration of domestic cattle and wildlife can boost genetic variability and increase biodiversity, and the use of bryophytes and lichens as bioindicators of biodiversity, air quality, and climate change. And most recently, at this point, I'm pleased to introduce our panelists for today. The first one is Dr. Duncan McFadden, the head of research and conservation at Oppenheimer Generations Research and Conservation. And the second is Rendan Nenguda, the senior research associate at Oppenheimer Generations Research and Conservation. Both our panelists have been involved in the JWO process for several years, and I hope their insights into the process will help guide you during your application. I would now take this opportunity to hand over to Dr. Duncan McFadden to take us briefly through the timelines for the JWO process. Over to you, Dr. Duncan McFadden.
Great, thanks so much, Peter. A quick run through those important dates. As many of you will know, applications are already open. In fact, they opened on the 24th of March this year. And important to note, of course, when they close. They close on the 2nd of May at 12 o'clock in the evening. You are required, as many of you will know, to submit a 2-page concept note as per the guidelines set up by the expert panel. These can be found on the Jennifer Ward Oppenheimer Research Grant website, JWO Research Grant.org. Important to note that the word count when applying should be adhered to. And of course, the questions at this stage asked thoughtfully. Those candidates who then advance to the next stage in this process will be invited to submit a full proposal by the 6th of June. Full proposals must be submitted by the 7th of July at 12 o'clock, which therefore gives one just over a month to put those full proposal applications together. The JWO Research Grant winner will be announced at Africa's premier scientific conference, the 14th Oppenheimer Research Conference, which of course is between the 15th and 17th of October. This award will be awarded on the 16th of October, which is on the second day in Midrand, Johannesburg. Important to note that registrations for the 14th Oppenheimer Research Conference are currently open. So those looking at submitting an abstract have until the 6th of June to do so. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you so much, Duncan. Thank you so much, Duncan. I think it would be helpful at looking at what has worked in the past. You have been involved in this process since the very beginning. Can you tell us what it was about for our first winner proposals that really stood out for you?
Thanks, Peter.
Firstly, we'd like to look at what stood out for you from Dr. Clement's proposal.
Thanks, Peter. Yes, Dr. Haley Clements, her program looked at biodiversity and intactness across Africa. And of course, very important that this had an Africa-wide focus, which dealt with the burning issues of biodiversity and intactness. It was a new, innovative, and never been done before project for this young scientist that was also ambitious and had published already to a large extent. Haley also had the right collaborators with well-established academics, and very important, these collaborators, a large number of them were actually across the continent. So many different countries, many different collaborators, and many different topics, and each of them capturing and consolidating data from the various countries and then across the continents. I think is that Karen?
Sure. I think taking from that, what is the key takeaway? What is the key takeaway for our audience? What are some of the do's and don'ts that we want to see?
Sure, Peter. I mean, some of the key takeaways are, that the programs shouldn't be narrow in their geographical footprint. For example, a single wetland in one country or a single bird species in the Kalahari. We also want to see a strong publishing record, so not limited or poor, and the student should be the lead author in many of those publications. So a strong publishing record with well-established collaborators is always a strong thing. We do provide a clear indication. They should have a clear indication of capacity building in their proposal and funding that's set aside for the development of the next generation of scientists.
Thank you so much, Duncan, for that.
Sure.
Now, I understand that the application process has changed quite a bit over the last 6 years when it started in 2019. Rendan, can you tell us about Dr. Conrad's application and what stood out?
Dr. Shannon Conradi was the most recent recipient of the Jennifer Ward Oppenheimer Research Grant. She won the grant in 2024. And so her study was on looking at physiological or thermal niches of various taxa under changing ecological conditions as a result of global change. What stood out and what was unique about Shannon's research was her emphasis on the advancement of environmental tech and environmental monitoring techniques. We also found that her research covered a broad range of ecosystems. What also stood out for her with her research was the scalability of the research, the geographical scalability of her research outputs post the research beyond just South Africa and Botswana, since her study sites were mostly based in South Africa and Botswana. As a result of Dr. Shannon Conradi's research, if I could draw 3 key takeouts that we'd be looking for from anybody who's looking to apply for the Jennifer Ward Oppenheimer Research Grant, is that your research should show clear pathways to impact. It should show solutions to African problems, so an African solution to an African problem. It should not be desktop research. We unfortunately do not fund or support desktop research, and we need to make sure that the methodology of all research or all concept notes that are submitted is quite rigorous. So unless you have rigorous methodology and demonstrate clear methodology, you will unfortunately not qualify for the grant. Thank you, Peter.
Sure. Thank you so much for that, Rendan. Okay. In terms of the eligibility criteria, we want to look at the eligibility criteria now. The grant was created to support an early career scientist. Duncan, what constitutes an early career scientist?
It's a good question, Peter. And again, I must just say, very important, this award is for someone who has graduated with their PhD. This does not include a medical degree, and the candidate it shouldn't be getting a PhD. They should be in the possession of that qualification. So we encourage programs that are ecologically based studies with strong links to natural scientists. This early career scientist should be someone that hasn't had a PhD for longer than 7 years post-graduating. So early career, However, the panel does make some exceptions for applicants that had taken time off for family responsibilities. Again, the majority of the time, the recipient's time must be spent on this project, and the $150,000 should contribute significantly to the execution of the program.
Thank you so much for that detailed answer, Duncan. Rendan, the guidelines state that the applicant should have strong links to an African institution. What does this mean?
Peter, this means that they must be linked to an institution or organization that's based on the African continent. In as much as whomever is on this call, let's assume that one of you will be the winners, and as much as you will receive the grant, you need to have links to an African institution, because the funding will not come directly to you, but it will be sent through the African institution. This can be an NGO, it could be a for-profit organization, government, scientific foundation, or even a research institution. And it's important that the institution has a proven ability to manage funds. We need to ensure that the winner is directing the funds to an institution that will be able to manage the funds on their behalf, because that's also a huge undertaking, and we do not want the winner to be worried about the dissemination of funds while they should be using that time towards the actual work that needs to happen on the ground. Because this is an African-based research grant, we want to support institutions that are creating the next generation of African researchers, and that's why we prescribe that you should have strong links to an African institution.
Wonderful. That's quite useful. The topic for the JWO is very broad and states that each applicant must demonstrate a strong link to biodiversity and conservation. Duncan, what type of projects are you looking for with a topic like this?
Thank you, Peter. I mean, we deliberately have kept it broad. We don't want to exclude anyone. What we're looking at is a big picture project that addresses a problem with a scientific solution. I mean, this is very much a science award, and all projects must demonstrate strong ecological links. Therefore, we are assessing the applicant's scientific rigor and solutions to their selected problems. We want to see strong links to the environment, cemented within the natural sciences. What we're really looking for is big, bold, sustainable, innovative, pan-African solutions to big picture problems. Thank you, Peter.
Sure. Thank you so much, Duncan, for this insightful answer. I was looking at what the expert panel looks for, and I saw that successful applicants will be those who are able to articulate their project's potential to create impact both during and beyond the grant period. Rendane, what does impact mean for you?
When we look at impact, Peter, we look at it threefold. So we look at continental impact. We need research that's going to benefit many people across the African continent. So whatever you do should be cross-boundary and have outputs that are scalable across the continent. We also look at policy impact. We understand that we don't want science that remains in the confines of science and labs and journals. We want science for impact. So you need to make sure that whatever proposal you're submitting is a proposal that will impact and influence decision makers. And we'll get onto those tables, the tables of decision makers and policy makers. The third thing we look at is at capacity development. The legacy of the grant needs to go beyond the recipient. And so we encourage the recipient to make sure that they have PhD, MSCs, and even honors students that they support through the Jennifer Ward Oppenheimer Research Grant. Thank you, Peter.
Well, thank you so much, Rendan, for that insightful answer. Well, today we are happy to have a previous winner with us. We welcome Dr. Lova. So Dr. Lova is a Malagasy researcher who won the JWO Research Grant in 2023 for a proposal entitled Bioindicators of Biodiversity, Air Quality, and Climate Change, leveraging non-charismatic groups bryophytes and lichens in the tropical Afro-Malagasy region. Her research is breaking new ground in a way that links plant biology, ecology, and conservation. Lova, can you tell us about your own application process? What made you feel that your research would fit this criteria?
Thank you, Peter. So I think the thing that I was main convinced that my research fit the criteria for JWO is because the research that I proposed tackled a global problem and issue that affect not only human health, but also biodiversity, especially in the global south. And so in 3-4 words, my research combined biodiversity research, climate change, air pollution, and conservation. And as you said, I propose to study a very non-charismatic group of organisms that for a very long time has been very neglected, especially in the global south. So this can be reflected by the fact that we have a lack of number of specialists in the region, and not a lot of research has been done, especially in that African Afro-Malagasy arc. And so we propose to study an understudied group, which is not narrow because just in Madagascar, there are about 1,200 species that has been recorded so far, and many African countries has not even been studied as far as what are the number of biodiversity. And you also propose to study tropical mountains, and not a lot of people will go to tropical mountains to just look for mosses and lichen. And we all know that we are now in a rush into trying to describe and discover, understand biodiversity before they go extinct, given all the threat into on our biodiversity. And so I think that was a bold idea to propose to JWO. And so the other point is air quality. So in many countries in the global south, we have 0 to very little monitoring of air quality. So to tackle the African problem, to go through air quality monitoring, it's very expensive to get data loggers. So we try to use mosses as bioindicator of and biomonitoring for air quality. So this is a very cheap to non-costly method that we will try to apply. And then the fact that we use Madagascar as a pilot is also an ideal, because then we could actually propose to apply the results across Africa. And so I think I had a very strong applications for JWO because it has a broad questions, it's innovative, and also we hope that we can use the result to influence policy making in terms of air quality monitoring, biodiversity monitoring, and conservation in Africa. And in addition to that, in terms of capacity building, we have a lot of students working with us. And so far I have 3 students, 2 working toward a PhD and 1 working toward a master.
Well, thank you so much for that detailed, those detailed insights, Dr. Lova. Duncan, I know that the expert panel also values projects that are transdisciplinary in nature. Given that this is a scientific award, why is the transdisciplinary element so important?
Thanks, Peter. Of course, transdisciplinary is very important because it demonstrates that the applicant has actually got a good understanding of how their solutions have relevance to society. For example, how will it affect livelihoods? Will it affect policy decisions? How will it impact conservation management decisions? So we're really wanting the outcomes of the project to enable the development through a real-world solution to real-world problems, and specifically African continent focused. Although this is a science award, we are looking to fund problems which are supported by science and not problems for the sake of science. So we don't want to just fund science that's not going to lead into anything. So a program that has lasting impact, that doesn't work in silos. That's transdisciplinary approach that will drive kind of long-lasting impact on the ground. Thanks, Peter.
Sure. Thank you so much, Duncan, for that answer. Over to you, Rendani. Another key element has been projects that rely on collaboration from stakeholders across the continent. Why should our applicants be thinking about what networks they can tap into?
Peter, considering the temporal and geographic scale at which we want the recipient to operate, we believe that networks and partners will enable them to have a greater reach and even greater impact of the project over a short period of time. Remember, the grant only runs over 3 years, and by the end of the 3 years, we'd like to see some evidence of what the recipient has been able to achieve. And so having those different partnerships across the board will quicken the results, if I could put it that way. It also allows for the project to have, the project's impact to continue post the project's end date. One example I can give is Dr. Gideon Ito, who's doing work on microplastics in freshwater and marine ecosystems. He's since moved on from the project, but he has partners in South Africa and in Nigeria who are continuing with the work, and they've made great strides, especially in contributing to certain policy. So having those different partnerships across the board enables that legacy of the work that you've conducted to continue. It also allows for a diverse set of perspectives. We want robust research, and often when you work in isolation, you find that you're not necessarily asking the right questions. And with a diverse group of individuals and experts, you're able to be steered in the right direction. Finally, it also ensures that the applicant and the award are well known across the continent. We want to pride ourselves in this becoming an African grant. We do not want to have a bias towards a certain country on the African continent. So having those networks also enables us to tap into those networks and ensure that other people beyond Southern Africa are aware of the Jennifer Ward Oppenheimer Research Grant and the potential impact it could have in their lives. Thanks, Peter.
Wow, thank you so much. That's a very insightful answer. A question to you, Rendani and Duncan. Are there other elements that make a concept note stand out for you?
Peter,
Well,
I think we've oh, sorry, Rendani,
Duncan, will you take it?
I'll take the first round.
All right, you go.
We really want a project that's kind of, as we said before, focused on African problems. And of course, that includes having an African team and African partners. Of course, it doesn't exclude having international collaborators either. And very important that the applicant needs to be an ambassador for the JWO award going forward during their tenure.
We also, thanks, Duncan. We also want a project where the potential and lasting impact pathways are clearly demonstrated. So we need to know what you're trying to do and what the impact of the work you're trying to do will have in the longer term. Thanks, Peter.
So thank you very much. A question for you, Dr. Lova. Briefly, what are some tips that you would give to those planning on applying for the JWO Research Grant this year?
I guess this goes without saying that everybody that's here, we are all in academia, and then we apply for several grants a year. So just like a small, we tend to forget the usual good practice. So this is just like a reminder to everyone. This is a very prestigious and competitive research grant. And so do not wait until the last minute to submit your applications. Have all your friends, your partners, even your family member read your concept note. Be bold, but also remember that you are presenting your research project to non-specialists in your field. And so what helped me prepare my outline when I was writing my application is to go through ORC objective on their website. And so my biggest tip is do your necessary stalking. The biggest tips are always on the ORC website, so do that. And good luck to everyone that's applying.
Thank you so much for those useful tips, Lova. So we've discussed what makes a good concept note or proposal. Maybe let's look at some of the pitfalls that previous applicants should avoid. Duncan, thinking about the proposals that you have seen, which proposal don't make it through the first filter?
Thank you, Peter. I mean, those that don't pay attention to the instructions, or where the abstract or submission is incomplete. I mean, concept notes, must have a title, and very important that one sticks to the word limit specified on the application form. Concept notes that are too short, indicate the applicant has not put enough effort into the concept note. Concept notes that are too long are indication that the applicant is not able to follow instructions. So concept notes that are not clear and concise around the objective or objectives of the program. And please note, and I'm saying it again, that all applicants must already have graduated with a PhD degree and not working towards one. I think very important, and as I've said, and I'll re-say it, be clear in what you want to achieve with this a 3-year award. And again, we don't fund consultancies, and as I think Rindani said earlier, we don't fund desktop studies. So if you're looking in that space, don't apply for this award. Thanks, Peter.
Sure. Wonderful, Duncan. Thank you so much. Rendan, based on your experience, which applications do the panel not favor?
I think I'm going to start by saying we work with a group of amazing expert panelists. They have expertise across the board in ecology. So you must be well aware of this when you're submitting your concept notes, and if you're invited to the full proposal stage when submitting your full proposal. I do understand it takes a lot of effort to put together a proposal, but the panel can see when an applicant has tried to fit their current research into the JWO criteria. So please make sure that the research that you're submitting for the JWO Research Grant is new research and not something you're just copying and pasting from research that's currently underway. We also are not prone to supporting researchers who submit proposals with a very narrow geographical area of study. We're not going to support anybody who's looking at a single wetland in a single province in South Africa somewhere. Unfortunately, that's not the scale at which we're trying to operate. As Duncan's mentioned before, we need it to be cross-border, cross-boundary. It's an African research grant. It's not a single country research grant. And also, sometimes we find that researchers will submit proposals, but it's only single species focused. Unfortunately, that just won't cut it for the Jennifer Ward Oppenheimer Research Grant. The last thing is that you submit a non-sciences proposal or proposal that's not necessarily linked to the natural sciences. Unfortunately, this is only for PhDs in the natural sciences with links to biodiversity, conservation, etc. No health or otherwise fields will be funded under this grant. We understand that our field is already doesn't receive as much funding as other industries. So we're trying to make sure that we funnel the funding into the right areas. And this is the area that we've seen has the greatest need.
Thank you. Quite clear there, Rendan. So Rendan, you raised a good point. A lot of the applications that have been received are not able to articulate their scientific solution correctly. Duncan, what should the applicants be considering?
I think we've touched on it a lot. And again, not a desktop study or a literature review or an evaluation. The actual work must be worthy of $150,000 US grant. We're looking for rigorous science that is with an innovative approach with sound methodology and of course, based on strong statistical analysis. Obviously stats are important, and so one of the things we look at is how strong that statistical analysis will be. I think it must have clear objectives, as we've said, a sound methodology, and then of course a thorough literature review, which really shows that one's got a grasp on this space and that you're showing the gaps through that. Thanks, Peter.
Sure, thank you so much for that answer. So I think it is good to also look forward. The second part of the application process is the full proposal, which is a much longer submission. If our applicants were to reach that stage, what should they not do, Rendan?
As Peter said, so we have two phases. We have the first phase where it's the concept note. And after that review process, we narrow it down to around 15 proposals. And then you'll be contacted to submit a full longer proposal, which includes the budget. Now, often we find that budget allocations are not reasonable. We unfortunately are not using the entire funding to fund one individual salary. So please be reasonable when putting together your budgets. We also find that the prospective recipient wants to use the funding towards, for instance, vehicle purchases or infrastructure development, such as building a lab. We do not fund building labs. We are okay with you using the funding for equipment, but unfortunately no permanent infrastructure or vehicles can be purchased using the grant funding. Also, the other thing that stands out, or that we need you not to do in applying for the grant, is not having enough budget set aside for capacity development, be it honors, masters, or PhD students. As we've mentioned before, the Jennifer Ward Oppenheimer Grant, yes, it funds early career scientists, but we also want to see the development of future leading ecologists on the African continent. Thank you.
Thank you. Duncan, any additions?
I think in addition to what Rendani has said, I mean, when looking at salary considerations, just incredibly important to note that the majority of the funding should be going towards the project, and only a maximum of 30% should be going towards the lead researcher's salary. We also want the applicant to be spending the majority of their time on this project. So not like 10% of their time is focused here and 90% elsewhere. So very important, the majority of the funding to the project and the majority of the time should be spent on this project. Thank you, Peter.
Sure. Thank you so much. This question is for you, for both of you, Duncan and Rendan. So Oppenheimer Generations Research and Conservation has done a wonderful job in communicating scientific research findings through popular pieces that can be understood by a broader audience. Is this an important consideration for the JWO Research Grant?
Peter, it is. Thanks, Duncan. Peter, it is an important consideration. As I said earlier on, this is science for impact. We don't want the science to stay within the labs or stay amongst scientists. We need it to drive certain change on the ground. So the applicant should have a plan on how they plan to disseminate their findings, both to academic audiences and non-academic audiences. And the findings should not only be for those who may understand complex jargon. Going back to the first example I mentioned with Gideon Idowu, because he's working on microplastics. Microplastics affect everyone, affect all normal communities that may not be exposed to scientific jargon, but he had to work in partnerships with radio stations and also develop media assets to get the information out there regarding what's happening with the microplastics within the communities that were affected or impacted by the microplastics. And that was an important component of his research, because it's not just about the impact on biodiversity, but the communities within the peripheries of these water systems are utilizing biodiversity as part of their livelihood strategies and are being impacted by the microplastics within these systems as well. So make sure that your findings not only cater for those who understand complex scientific jargon, but are also accessible to those so that they can learn and apply their findings to how they navigate their way through these ecosystems that they may be operating in.
And I think additional to that, I mean, Oppenheimer Generations Research and Conservation is fortunate that we have a PR company and a science communication company, SABI looking at PR, and JWO Media Africa, which are science communicators, and they've really added benefit in the past. And we certainly would encourage winners to leverage this opportunity. You know, often scientists chase the next peer-reviewed paper and often forget that it's narrow often. And as Vindani said earlier, and it only speaks to a few members of the public, and science, narrowed science often. But through JWO Media and SABI, there's an opportunity to work with journalists, to be interviewed, to really get the value and the essence, the importance of the project through various media, you know, whether it be radio, whether it be through Daily Maverick, etc., etc. So it is an important component, and one as equally important to the science is disseminating those findings and getting them out there. Thanks, Peter.
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much about that, leveraging the opportunity of having, you know, science communication companies. I'll ask Dr. Lova here, because we are privileged to have her, as she is one of our previous winners. You worked with JWO Media Africa to help you craft your presentation for the Oppenheimer Research Conference last year. Can you tell us about that experience?
Yeah, so working with JWO Media was incredible. There are things that you don't always figure as a scientist on how to present your work. And so they were a really big help for me preparing my presentation. We went through every single slide together. We went through, it's sort of a media training actually. So they give you some tips on how to present yourself, what to say, what kind of words gonna be catchy for the audience, and or not always specialist in your group. Like I study something that nobody, probably 75% of the people in the audience didn't know. And so at the end, my presentation was, I was very proud of it at the end with the help of JWO Media. And then the other thing that I would like to add on that is that if you win the JWO Research Grant, you'll get to do a couple of interviews with journalists, and you have to write something about your project that everybody that's reading the journal, the local journal, is going to read. So that was also very helpful at the beginning of when I get in 2023, when I got the grant, that I was working with them as well, going through that procedure.
Well, thank you all so much, Duncan, Rendan, and Lova, for this informative discussion. I think at this point in time, let's open the conversation now to some questions for our audience via the chat box. Our audiences, may you all please be posting your questions in the chat box. So the first question that we have received says, is an African-born early career researcher based in North America, but work closely with an African institution eligible to apply?
Peter, I'll take that one.
Okay.
Or you want to? I'll take that one. Absolutely. In fact, one of our previous winners is an African-born scientist working abroad, as long as they've still got an affiliation with an African university or institution, and the problem or the project is on the African continent. When we open to wherever you are, as long as you're an African-born and you've got those affiliations, and the bigger program is on the continent.
Sure. Thank you for that useful answer. The second question says, would I be eligible as someone who already has a permanent position as a lecturer, like still within 5 years of a PhD?
Duncan, I guess I'll take that one. Yes, you would be eligible. In fact, it would probably work to the benefit of the students that you'd be working with, because it means that more of the funds would go towards building greater capacity, and you'd have a bigger cohort of students that you can afford to fund because your position would be funded by your institution. So yes, you would be eligible.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. The next question, the person said, if I have a permanent position, can we include budget to support a number of postdocs to work with me on the project?
I'll take that one. As long as the winner is the lead, and it doesn't matter if they're got a permanent position, actually it's beneficial because then their salary is paid by the institution already. So absolutely, and then the money can be reallocated to postdocs and a variety of students, as Randani said earlier. Very important, of course, is that you are an African lead, and that you are under an early career scientist.
Mm. And just to add to Duncan's point, it's very important that you're an African lead in an African institution, or with partners with links to an African institution where the funding will go through.
Absolutely.
Sure. Thank you for those useful answers. The next question, how many people are on the panel and do we get feedback on our applications?
Will you take it? We have 10 people on the panel, coming from various backgrounds, from forest ecology, social ecology. It's a very widespread group. We even have small mammal ecologists. So it's a great group of expertise. And in the past year, we received over 600 applications. So giving back feedback to 600 applicants would be a difficult task. We do give feedback, but that would only be once you get to the full proposal stage, because at least then it's manageable, and we can tap into the panel and panelists just to give you feedback, not crypt notes on how to apply next year, but give you just enough feedback to redirect you so that you're more aligned with what we're looking for.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. The next question is, would you consider One Health studies?
So I think 5 and 6, I mean, both questions relate to One Health. And
Yes.
The short answer is yes, as long as it's got a strong environmental focus, and it's not, we've had applications before where they're actually focused on health with a little bit of environment in them. So if it's balanced, of course, we know that environment and communities are linked. So absolutely, we would consider One Health proposals.
Sure. Thank you so much. This question says, if I got Duncan right, he said 30% of the budget should cater for the recipient salary. What about maybe consultant involved in the project and students? Could you please clearly highlight how the budget allocation should look at?
Sure. I mean, the bottom line is 30% can go to the winner salary. Consultants, students, etc. Obviously, we can split budget accordingly. That 30% only refers to the winner of the JWO.
Yeah.
So we've had it before where full proposals have been submitted, and 90% is for the person's salary, the lead salary. And then we think it's not really fair, number one, on students or anyone else one needs to bring in. And of course, the focus should be on the project and ensuring the execution of the project, and not just getting a salary for oneself.
Sure. Thank you so much for that answer. This question asks, can you elaborate on how JWO defines natural science and conservation?
Should I take that one?
Take that one.
We define it as anything that links to biodiversity, links to conservation, linked to the natural environment. So if you're doing a biochem study that has some links to the natural environment and links to biodiversity, we deem it as part of the natural sciences. Duncan, if you want to add.
Yeah, spot on, Donnie. I can't add. Well done.
Well, sure. Thank you so much for those questions that you've answered, Duncan.
Peter, I just saw Buster asked another question.
Sure.
He said, would we fund research work that uses technology such as remote sensing and AI to address pressing African socio-ecological challenges?
Sure.
I guess I'm sure you can see Duncan nodding. So we definitely would, because one of our most recent recipients is relying strongly on remote sensing. Obviously, there is some ground truthing that's happening within that research, but yes, we would, as long as it's not fully desktop. We're happy to support such research.
Sure, thank you. Maybe another question says, would you consider economic valuation within the project integrated with other research objectives?
We need clarity. What do they mean by economic valuation within the project? Can whoever asked that question please clarify?
Yeah, sure. We'll just wait if the person can clarify.
Yeah.
I think they're asking if they can have an objective on economic valuation, but then also integrating the other objectives of the project.
I mean, if it's a wildlife economy question, looking at pulling in different research around a key or couple of key issues, then absolutely fine. But if it's bringing in consultants and doing evaluations, no.
Sure. Thank you so much. So any last tips for those applying? If I can get your last words and tips from each and every one of you.
Well, I think from my side, be clear on your objectives. Think of big problems, then solutions to those problems, putting real science behind these big picture problems. And again, look at a large landscape, look across numerous countries. I mean, it gets frustrating for us on the expert panel, when it's a small wetland in Tuba, and they're wanting 150,000 grant, and that's it. It's got to be cross-boundary, transdisciplinary, big picture thinking.
Thank you, Duncan.
I'll add my 2 cents as well. I think just going back to Lova's point, be bold. You don't have to do what's already been done. You can try out something novel. Also, make sure that you have networks and partnerships that will show or prove your ability to conduct the research, because if you decide that you're doing some genetic sequencing and you don't even have or somebody within that space on your team, will question whether you have the capability to conduct the research. So make sure, even if you make it to the full proposal stage, if there's anything within your research that is not well reflected within your skill set, for instance, in your CV, your partners should reflect that skill set as well. And good luck, be bold, all the best with applications.
Sure, thank you, Rendan.
If I have a last tips for everybody, is that the JWO Research Grant is a huge opportunity to go beyond your own African country. So I think they don't like it when you do just sit on your desk. So go discover other countries. Try to research on what are you going to do and what's been done, for example, in Zimbabwe, if you're in Malawi, and then trying to include that in your research proposal. And most importantly, follow the guideline letter by letter.
Please.
Sure. Thank you for those tips. Well, thank you everyone for your questions. And thank you our panelists even for answering these questions. I see there are a few minutes left in this webinar, so we would like to close off the discussion. I would like to thank Duncan, Rendan, and Lova for their input and significant contribution to this discussion. It has been very valuable to have you on the panel and to get your insights into the JWO grant application process. OGRC also has a Tipping Points webinar series where we ask the questions that matter about how we balance conservation and development. The next Tipping Points webinar will take place next week on the 24th of April, and will focus on a discussion about current state of conservation funding. So please tune in for that if you'd like to hear more. Please keep an eye on the JWO website and the OGRC social media for more information. And please sign up for the JWO newsletter as well as the OGRC newsletter to keep up to date about events. A link is available in the chat box. It has been posted. For this webinar, a recording will be uploaded to the OGRC YouTube channel. It's called Oppenheimer Generations, Research and Conservation. Please check it out if you have missed any part of the question and answer. Thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Tipping Points webinar next week. Goodbye for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.